Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to We're Just Talking About It. This is episode 11, and this week we are super excited to introduce you to our second guest ever on the show. His name is Munim Dean. Munim was born in Bangladesh and grew up in Oklahoma, where his parents still live. He is finishing a doctoral degree in epidemiology and is a published researcher and photographer. He and his wife, reflecting the way in which they were raised, take pride in being observant but open-minded Muslims who are always up for experiencing new activities and making new friends. Munim spends way too much time on Wikipedia, specifically, and the internet in general. He always enjoys meandering conversations about different religions, history, politics, science, music, and most any other subject he can wrap his brain around. And that is certainly what we did in these episodes coming up. We meandered through a bunch of different topics, including what it was like to come to America at the age of 8 years old. As you will soon learn, Munim is extremely personable and super enjoyable to speak with, and he has a really unique perspective about what it's like growing up as a Muslim in America. We hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did.
So my family and I moved here when I was 8 years old in 1995, so 23 years now.
And where were you before you moved to Oklahoma?
So I was born in Bangladesh, and that's where my family and I lived.
Wow, so your accent almost completely shifted. You left at such a young age. Your accent, I mean, you wouldn't pick up immediately that your accent isn't completely Oklahoma.
Yeah, I don't know, because I think I went through a few different phases, because you're right, I was young enough when I came that I just picked up the English and the accent that I heard in school. And, I think it was probably in middle school when I just heard myself talk, and, nothing against my fellow Oklahomans, but I realized that I sounded like Bonanza, and I'm like, well, maybe I should.
So you're somewhere between Bonanza and Bangladesh.
I know, if you draw a line, I'm somewhere in the middle. But no, I think, obviously, I have sort of a generic American accent, and so people who hear me speak are like, oh, you're American. I'm like, yeah. But then they're always lost as to where I'm from in America, and I think I like that, that it's just basic American and then not much regional accent to it.
Right. Like you could be from anywhere. It's not the down south southern drawl accent. Yeah.
True. Right. I mean, I love the South, but I don't necessarily want that to announce that every time I just open my mouth.
So you said 8 years old is when you moved to the United States. Do you have like a first memory from that experience?
So I ended up in Oklahoma because my mom, after her medical training in Bangladesh, she got interested in public health. And at the time, public health was kind of a new-ish field in Bangladesh, and so the training wasn't particularly good. And so she's like, well, let's look into the U.S. And of the places that she applied to, she got into the University of Minnesota in Mankato and Oklahoma. And so we were trying to sit around, okay, where should we go? And my grandmother had what was probably the simplest yet very wise suggestion that, Minnesota is really, really cold.
I'm with Grandma.
Yeah. So Oklahoma sounds good. So literally we ended up in Oklahoma because it was warmer. And I think my first memory, my mom came a little bit before my dad and I did, and we moved in January, and it was really, really cold. And I was always a kind of a car kid, as I'm still into cars, but as a kid, I was really into cars, right? And on the drive home from the airport, I saw all these 18-wheelers. And the trucks in Bangladesh aren't 18-wheelers. Like, we just don't have big trucks like that. Mm-hmm. We just don't. And so I remember, seeing 18-wheelers in movies and stuff, and I was, amazed. I'm like, oh, my God, that's a real-life 18-wheeler. That sounds silly looking back, but when you're in a little car and you look up this gigantic truck that just goes on forever. So I think that's my actual first memory of the United States.
Wow.
So are you old enough to remember Burt Reynolds and the Smokey and the Bandit stuff?
Oh, yeah. My dad and I watched that a lot growing up.
So you see these 18-wheelers and you're just thinking, where's that Trans Am at? Where's the Bandit?
Where's that Trans Am at? I'm like, we're breaking out people's handles, and I'm like, okay, we're running from the police now.
That's awesome.
That is pretty great. So what was it like? What do you remember about growing up in Bangladesh?
Sure. So, obviously I was pretty young when I left, but, I'm still old enough to, remember a lot of it. And we were a close-knit family, and we still are. And in the part of Bangladesh where where we live, Dhaka, the capital, it's a very urbanized city. And like most urbanized places around the world, most people live in condos and apartments as opposed to individual detached homes. And so that was our setup. And my grandfather, he was a family physician, so he had his clinic on the bottom floor of this building. He lived on the second floor. My aunt and uncle lived on the third floor, and then we lived in a small apartment just next door. And so our entire family was right there.
Wow.
So, yeah, so that was always a lot of fun. And since my parents both worked, my aunt and uncle both worked, after school, we'd hang out with my grandma and grandpa. And my grandpa, he figured out that his clientele would benefit from a doctor that stayed open later hours. So instead of doing like an 8 to 5 gig, his workday was like noon to 8 p.m. He'd get the after work crowd. And so he had a standing arrangement that he'd come up for lunch maybe around 3 p.m. or so, and it was my job to read him the paper. Just like he'd kind of lie down and close his eyes after lunch. He's like, all right, Munim, let's go. So we'd start with we'd start with the front page and just kind of run through the headlines, and then if he found something particularly interesting, he's like, hey, follow that up. So we turn over to page 10 or wherever it was and read the rest of the article. And like at the time I thought it was cool because I'm like, I'm reading the paper, and now I'm looking back and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm over here just like being his radio for no reason. I know, it was like the human version of Audible. So so that was one of the fun things I remember growing up. And then my cousin, who's just a year and a half younger than me, we basically grew up together, and we're still very close today. So we were kind of like partners in crime, if you were, just running around and doing things. So that's a lot of what I remember about Bangladesh.
That's great. Do you remember, I guess we can start kind of by the transition to the U.S. and being 8 years old. I'm trying to think, what grade is that? Is that like first grade?
Second grade.
Second grade. So was the transition easy, hard, traumatic? What do you remember about transitioning into second grade?
So obviously when you move to a new country, the first thing you think of is, well, language. And I was fortunate in that, your history, Bangladesh used to be part of British India, and there's still a lot of British influence, particularly in the education system. So a lot of people learn basic English in school, and my parents and my aunt and uncle too, they were both very pro-education and English education in general. So they made sure then put my cousin and I in a private school that just taught in English. So even though it was, like British Indian English, I had a pretty good grasp of English and I could communicate, which was a huge help. And I think that's gave me a leg up, certainly. So when I started second grade here, Miss Aloe's class, I'm actually still Facebook friends with my second grade teacher. She's such a wonderful, wonderful human being.
That's awesome.
And I didn't know this, but I moved here in January, so that's the second semester of school. I missed the fall semester. So we were her first class out of after she got her teaching credentials. So she was kind of learning as she went too. And so before I started school, my parents and I had visited when they went to enroll me. And so like, oh, would you like to see your new classroom? I'm like, sure. So I went around and I got to meet some of my new classmates. And then I started school. School part was fine, but Oklahoma is a tornado country, as I'm sure you're aware. And so we do these things called tornado drills. And and so the day that my first day of school, the school bus was kind of late, and so we had to call the transport because they didn't know that there was to be a stop near where we lived. So we finally got this special school bus. It was just the late bus. And so I go to the school, and I didn't realize that the school door where you walk into from the parking lot is different from the school door that you walk into from the bus. And so the school bus driver was like, well, here we are. I'm like, this looks nothing like where we were. Where are we? And eventually he's like, oh, okay, it's over here. So he walked me out to the main door, and we go in, and I walk into the middle of a tornado drill. And so, the entire school population is, down and prostrated against the wall. I'm like, what is going on? What is this?
Oh my
gosh. That's awesome.
And so thankfully the principal and her secretary, they walk around and do the checks with the tornado drill. They were standing outside the office, which is by the main door, and they recognized me. Well, I'm like, oh. They're like, oh, don't worry about this. This just happens, once every couple of months. I'm like, I still don't know what this is, but...
Welcome to Oklahoma.
Yeah, welcome to Tornado Alley.
Welcome to Tornado Alley. That's the truth. So then, the students were super welcoming, and I think, and I'll get to that in a second, but I guess I was the first person that came to the school directly from a different country, right? So they were like, oh, that's so cool. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I guess. And as I was saying, even though I knew English and I could communicate just fine. I still had a weird accent on certain words. And so I remember one time we were studying something about science, and the word mammals came out kind of odd sounding for me. And one of my classmates just kind of like mimicked that back. And Miss Alloy, my teacher, she turns around, she's like, no, you stop that right now. We don't do that in here. And so that's just something, that shows what kind of teacher and what kind of person she was. And that kind of set the tone, I think, for the rest of the year. So I really have nothing but good memories.
So that was elementary school and just kind of getting into America. Is there any time in your assimilation to, learning the American culture and in childhood before you reach adulthood that you kind of stands out in your mind that you want to touch on?
I remember we went to see, it was a thing in school that we always take field trips. I think this was back when the budget still allowed such things. Mm-hmm. So we'd go to field trips to different things. And we went to a field trip to see our local baseball team play. They're a minor league affiliate to the Dodgers now, I think. So we went to go see it. I'd never been to a baseball game before, and that seems like kind of crazy. But, it's like baseball is just not a sport where I grew up or where I grew up before the United States. And I remember just walking to the baseball stadium, and then, the announcer was like, oh, welcome to America's pastime, and, all the things that baseball announcers do. And I'm like, okay, so this is something I should probably understand. America's pastime is going to be important going forward. And so, thankfully, our PE teacher, she's like, okay, remember, we've done t-ball and, kickball and things in school. She's like, all right, it's just like kickball, so this is what's happening. I'm like, okay, cool. And so that was like, I suppose it's a little bit cliche, but baseball stands out in my mind.
One of those things you remember.
Did you play any sports growing up?
Yeah, so our school classes, we always put forward a soccer team. So we played, but, it's elementary school soccer, so we're not really going for talent more than, hey, it gives the kids something to do.
Yeah.
So I did soccer all through elementary school, and then in middle school, I was a Cub Scouts when I was, that's an important topic. We'll come back to that in a second now that I think about it. And I did tennis and in high school, and then backpacking and things of that nature in Student Scouts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And, I know that in some of your previous episodes, Jason, you talked about having a Jewish den mother, right? And going to, synagogue and things with your friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So that actually kind of struck a chord with me. So the organization that sponsored my Cub Scout pack was actually a Catholic church. And a lot of the families were, religious Catholic folks. So I spent a lot of time in Catholic churches when I was growing up. Huh. And so I found myself really lucky that I got to see Catholic services and things of that nature, and then really just experience that firsthand. And then later on in Boy Scouts, we were sponsored by a Presbyterian church. And so that was I feel like that was a significant part of my childhood. Once a month, once a week, what have you, was spent in churches. So yeah, I think that's a really great way to just learn about other people.
Do you think that had an effect on you and understanding other religions? Did that make it easier for you and for other people to understand you? Did that make it easier for you to talk about your religion or relate to people in America?
Yeah, I think it definitely did, because in school it's 20 kids or whatever, and for the time that you're at school, most of the time you're doing homework or studying and just learning. So there's not a lot of opportunity necessarily for side conversations about things as religion, if that makes sense. So I think in the Scouts, as you know, they make a policy of being it's not really a religious organization per se. They ask you to believe in something, but all are welcome. At least all should be welcome.
Yeah.
And so doing things like comparative religion, world citizenship, working on those types of things, I think that really made it easier for people who had maybe never met a Muslim person before to be like, oh, Muslim, that's Muslim. Okay. And then I was extremely fortunate in that both my scout groups, actually, they were very, very cool about, any kind of religious accommodation. If we had food, they'd be like, okay, here's something without pork for you, which I really appreciate. And then sort of, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but one of the standout memories is, 9/11, everybody knows where they were on that day and what the day was like. I'm no exception. And one of the sad things that happened, after so many people died and after all that destruction, was that a lot of people who looked a certain way or were Muslim, or even Hindus and Sikhs maybe looked like they could be quote-unquote Arab or Muslim, were subjected to bullying and things of that nature. And thankfully, I was not. But one of the things that I still remember, I'll probably never forget, is that two of my scout leaders, by that time, they'd gotten to know my parents and everything, so they called our home and they had a word with my parents, and then my dad was like, hey, it's Mr. Eldridge from Scouts, or it's Mr. Fry from Scouts. And they called and they're like, hey, we just want you to know that nothing should happen to you as you are. We don't think any different about you, and that if anything like that happens, certainly tell your parents and tell us too. We're here for you. And so at the time, it was just a nice phone call, but I think it was older, and I met more people who had a far worse experience than I did post 9/11, and I just realized what a nice and important gesture that was. So absolutely, I would say that scouting was one of the major ways that I think I understood people that were different from me, and I hope that they understood a little bit more about me too.
I think that's a really good story to discuss. I think a lot of people miss that the more you're integrated in your community and you learn about other religions and you're part of your community and they know who you are as a human, and they get past how you look or where you go to religious service or where your family is from, that made that difference for you after September 11th, that they reached out to you. Hey, we know there could be trouble and we're here for you. Make sure you tell us if something happens, because we're going to correct that because we know you. That's an interesting. I haven't heard that perspective from somebody. You're right. Usually you talk to somebody, it's more of a horror story of how they were treated, but
Right.
that's the other side of the coin in America.
From 18-wheelers to tornado drills, Munim had a very unique experience coming to America, and we continue this conversation. As always, thanks for listening, and stay tuned to We're Just Talking About It, and you can follow us on Instagram at We're Just Talking About It. Till next time.